to another episode of Teach MA Dude, where you're going to get all the insights and all the real perspective of an actual practicing real Massachusetts teacher. So you know the perspective you're getting and the background and the kind of things I'm sharing with you are coming from someone who's actually working with students in the front line. Today, what we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about absenteeism and attendance policies. And as you can see here in this graphic that I'm going to show you, this is actually the chronic absenteeism rate of students throughout the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And it shows that in 2020-2021 alone, as much as a quarter of students were missing more than 10% of the school year. So that's 18 days or more. What can we do? What's going on about this attendance? What can we do? What are the kinds of things that you're going to see in school in terms of holding students to that high bar of actually coming to school? And what kind of attendance policies are actually going to really be beneficial for students in the long term? I'm going to give you a real perspective of someone who's taught high school, college, both high school and college, and that's before, during, and really as we've emerged from the events over the past few years. So let's jump into it. All right, so I'm going to start off by saying this, and hopefully it's not too controversial of a statement. Attendance is crucial. It's probably one of the most important things because the reality is, as teachers, we want to educate the students that we're serving on a day-to-day basis. But the reality is we can only educate the students if they show up to school. That's crucial. And the reality is, and I've seen this on the front line, so when I say reality, I mean the reality that I've seen. It tends to be that, look, there's lots of different types of kids that we work with, right? And so on one hand, we have the students who are intrinsically motivated. They want to learn, they're excited, they're passionate, they have high hopes for themselves, they hold themselves to high expectations. They're going to do whatever the teacher puts in front of them because they're actually there to learn and they're excited to learn. And the reality is those kinds of students, generally speaking, are going to show up on a day-to-day basis pretty consistently. In an honors class, the kind of students who don't really show up as much, those are the students that you tend to worry a little bit more about because it tends to be that they've got something else going on behind the scenes. And at the same time, having taught college, like what I worry about is the idea that if we cannot get them regularly attending class, then the issue is when they get to college, they're going to think that it's okay to not regularly go to class because they were able to get away with that in high school. And I think with the honors kids, when you have those kids who are really intrinsically driven, really are beneficial to the education, they're going to kind of get that nip in the butt when they get to high school. The reality is we have to take a look at the not so strong students, the not so intrinsically motivated students. And I think during the events of the COCO, you know what I'm getting at. I don't want to have any kind of stuff happen to me on YouTube, but you know what I'm talking about over the past few years with the COCO. You know, where I'm concerned is that a lot of the policies that we are trying to implement that really we wanted to do kind of in the benefit of students really only helped those students who were already doing strongly and really didn't cut in favor of the students who didn't have that natural intrinsic motivation. And I think one thing that fell by the wayside is really pushing for strong attendance. You can see in that graphic I showed you at the beginning, if you look at the senior class alone, more than 1 in 4 seniors was missing. Again, 1 in 4, that's 26% technically there, was missing 18 days or more, okay? Because in Massachusetts, chronic absenteeism is defined as missing 18 days of school or more, 10% of the school year for 180 days. Now, the issue with that is that, let's think about real life here. First of all, if you think about it from before we think about real life, if we think about it from a quarter perspective, most schools are cut into either trimesters or most often I see semesters or quarters. From a semester basis, that means that you're missing 9 days a semester to get to 18 a year or more. You're missing about, on average, 4 days a quarter, if it's quarters, or about 6 days a semester, or a trimester, that is. So the issue with that is that if you're missing, I do it quarterly, so let's look at quarterly. If you're missing 4 days per quarter, what that means is that a typical quarter in a class is 8 weeks. So if you're missing 4 days or more, that means that every other week you are missing a day of school. And the issue with that is that it's preventing you from really building up the momentum you need, right? What you got to think about is when that, for the most part, right, for the 99.99%, teachers are showing up. Teachers are having a strong level of effort that they're putting into the curriculum. And especially in some of those cumulative subjects, we think the maths, the sciences, and even the English and the humanities, the concepts really build on one another. And so when you don't come in as a student, what's happening is you're kind of killing that momentum and you're not allowing that momentum to build up. The other reality we got to think about is, in real life, to be fair, teachers typically are allowed, from what I've seen in my experience, my career, teachers are typically allowed to miss about 15 days per year. Now, that being said, at the college level, I almost never saw teachers missing class. I've taken in my college career, I think I've taken 1 day off ever, and that's because I was getting married. All right, so that's an extremely extenuating circumstance. But outside of that, I don't think I've ever missed a day of teaching college. I've had teachers miss college classes, again, extremely sick, like hospitalized. And I don't think any of us are saying if you're being hospitalized, you're really, really sick, tough cookies, you got to make it to school. I don't think anyone's thinking about that, kid. But I think what we do have to think about is this idea that, look, if we think about it, if we think about most real jobs, what I think about is kids missing 20 days. Some kids are even missing 30 days. And the issue with that is, in real life, you are very unlikely to run into a situation where you're going to be successful if you're missing that many days in a calendar year. Of course, you may not get fired, but here's some things you got to think about. One, if you're missing days, you're not being paid for them. That's coming out of your paycheck, right? Eventually, you're going to have to work to make an income. You don't show up for an hourly job, you don't get paid. Now, if you have a salary job, as folks might know, once you run out of your allotted days, you are going to be docked on your pay. The other issue is when we think about it from a long term, it does have a negative perception on you. Again, if there's extremely extenuating circumstances, I think people are going to understand that. But if you're missing days and days and days and days, it is going to look negatively upon you when it comes to like a job evaluation. And you might get passed over for promotions and raises and things like that. Think about it from a promotional perspective. Who's going to promote someone into a leadership position who's missing a lot of days of work? I mean, if you think about it, if you need those leaders to show up, you need those leaders to lead everyone. If you're not there, you can't lead people. In my experience teaching, I do think that from a teacher's perspective, if you do have, typically I've seen 15 days per school year. That being said, you are strongly discouraged, and again, except for extreme circumstances, and I think in the wake of the cocoa, this kind of was loosened a little bit. But I think there's kind of an unwritten rule that you really should not be burning out all of your sick days every year. One, you're going to not have anything to roll over to the next year. Two, if you burn it out, you're going to stop getting paid. But I think there's a negative perception of taking a lot of days because you need to be there with the students. You need to guide the students. And I've seen, at least in a couple cases, teachers where they get to that third year, right, and there's a professional status coming up, right, or tenure, some people say. We call it professional status. And there's hesitancy, right? The students are like, this teacher's not really showing up. The admin's like, this teacher is not really showing up. And that can be an issue. That can be an issue. And I've seen teachers kind of get let go and have negative connotations around that. But the thing is, we need to reinforce to students that you do need to show up. And I'd also add on, and I know I said absence in the name of the video, but we also got to think about tardiness too. I have had students in high schools that I teach where I'm thinking in a 180-day year, I've had students, a handful, accruing more than 100 tardies in a school year to the point where they're coming late to school almost every single day. And the sad thing is, on one hand, calling the parents, and believe me, in many situations, I do call the parents, no impact, right? Like, okay, I'm upset, it's not good, I'll talk to him. Doesn't move the needle. School administration, not willing to dig in, doesn't move the needle. I'm going to tell you this from a college perspective. And if you're a student, you need to listen to this. Your teachers in college are going to know who is late and who is not. I'm going to tell you for a fact. The first names of kids that I learn when I'm in college are the kids who come late. Because when my college class, I take attendance. The classes I teach are weekly classes, so I really strongly emphasize attendance. If you are coming late to class or not coming to class, you're going to be the first name that I learn. You don't want people to know your name because you're coming late. That's not why you want to be known. You want people to learn your name because you're showing up. You're asking questions. You're doing your homework. You're putting in a strong effort. You're contributing answers, right? Maybe you even come to the board and help do an example, right? You want to make your name known, right? Because that's really what you have control over. There's many, many things in life you don't have control over. But one thing you do have control over is how you're going to be perceived by others, right? Your actions influence people's perceptions of you, right? And one way to drive that in a positive way is coming on time, staying for the whole class, and just putting your best foot forward. I think that's going to go a long way. So the issue is we need to start really having really well thought out intentional policies around absence and tardiness. How do we do that? So the first thing I think we need to do is I think it's very, very important that schools need to develop the fortitude and the courage to really limit what they are going to call an excused absence. I'm very fortunate that I work at a school currently that says, hey, listen, because this frustrates me to no end, right? You're going to have this all the time. Parents, for whatever reason, they're going to take their kid out of school because the parent happens to have a week off or something from their personal job and say, you know what? I've had this happen. I swear to God. I'm going to take my kid. They're going to go on a service trip to Africa. Kid's gone 3 weeks in the middle of the year, right? And I understand sometimes it's important to do this thing, but it's like, guys, the kid needs to learn. This is a kid who was not even in the highest level class, right? This kid just disappears. They're going to fall behind. They got 5, 6, 7 classes they got to get caught up with. So I really think one thing I like about my current school is like, hey, look, you want to go on vacation? These absences are not excused. The teacher is not under any obligation to help you do and work, right? The teacher is not going to be liaising with you and helping you figure out your work when you're on this vacation. It's going to be your responsibility to make up anything when you come back, et cetera, et cetera. So the first thing is I think we need to really start saying, parents, if you are going to take your kid out of school, this is the reality. In Massachusetts, you have a week in February, you have a week in April, you have a couple weeks in December, you have basically 2 whole months, July, August, the last part of June, you got some long weekends in between. You got to stick to that. I understand those are more expensive. I understand that, those might not align with your personal time off. But the thing is, these are the days when teachers are showing up to teach your kids. Every single one of those 180 days is important. You don't want to have a reputation of the kid who's always cutting out last minute, cutting out early. You don't want to have that kid. Just please get your kid to school 180 days a year on time for the whole day. Unless it's like they're sick, they're going to go to a doctor's appointment. It's really, really life or death. Okay? Other than that, you got to have the kid in school. We got to start pushing that because the thing is, I understand that there's things that parents want to do with their kids. I respect that, and I appreciate that. But the kid needs to be in school. So it's very important that we really start limiting what we count as attendance. In my opinion, There should not be any excused days, unless there's a doc. There should be a doctor's note or something like that. Now, I understand that from a teacher's perspective, teachers are allowed to miss days, right? I could miss 2 days in a row or 3 days in a row, likely, without having to come up with a doctor's note. But the difference between me and a child is that I would have put forth, I am more capable of, one, identifying what genuinely do I need a day for, right? A child's going to be like, oh, I'm going to miss a test, right? I got a test coming up. I'm gonna call in. I'm not going to go in that day, right? Teachers generally are not going to do that, right? I'm not going to call in, right? If anything, I'm less likely to call in when I'm giving a test because I want to make sure everything goes well. So the teacher, again, it's not perfect. I don't want to generalize, but the reality is, teachers, I believe, it's a different situation. Also, the reality is, the student needs to develop that knowledge. It's going to make a bigger impact on the student who needs to develop that knowledge than the teacher who's going to deliver that knowledge, right? The students are in a formative moment of their life, right? When they enter high school, that is when they enter elementary school to when they leave high school, those are 13 big years, right? 13 big years. And if we think about it, if there's 180 days a year, right? 13 years, right? That's a lot of days, right? That's like a big number of days, right? If we want to be exact, 13 years, 180 days, right? What would that be? Well, that would be 2,340 days. Those 2,340 days, you're not going to get those days back if you're not in school. There's no way. Teachers aren't going to stay at the end of the year because you didn't come in some days. You have to make the most of that. So I believe, to be honest, in my opinion, I like the method when I was a kid. Look, if you miss, I believe it was like more than 3 days per term, unexcused, you should not be getting credit for that term. I'm sorry. You have a responsibility to show up to school. Similarly, tardies need to be taken, like there needs to be some effort to deal with tardies, right? And look, I think the issue is, in many districts, you're going to have issues going on outside of school. Kids are going to come in tardy. But I think the bigger issue is, it's kind of like, what do you do about it? So if you have a lot of kids coming in tardy, right? Look, I've worked in a school where, the teachers would be responsible for assigning kids detention if they are not in that classroom when the bell rings. Beautiful. I'm on board with it. But what would frustrate me is that I would see kids who would be tardy every single day that I can imagine walk right by an administrator. Administrator says, "Hey, how's it going? X. Oh, hope you have a good day." Well, the administrator needs to set a tone. And I get it. You don't want the kid to walk in and the first thing they have be a negative experience. But the reality is, you have to love the kid enough to say, listen, you were late. That's not okay. Because the reality is, when they get to college or they get to their job in the future, it's not going to be like that. So either they come late too much, they're going to get fired from their job. They're not going to be able to take care of themselves. They're not going to be able to take care of their family. They're not going to be able to pay the bills. Or the supervisor is not going to say anything, and they're going to get passed over for raises. They're going to get passed over for promotions. And think about it like this. If you have someone who works $15 an hour, right? They're supposed to get a raise of, let's say they would get a raise of 5% on, 5% for the next year. Okay? So if we give them a raise of 5%, sorry, I'm trying to do some quick math. That means they're going to get $15.75 an hour. All right? And so at that rate, they're going to be making $31,000 a year. But now, what if they only make 2% in terms of their raise? Well, that little 2%, because they came late all the time, instead of getting 5%, right? If they do that, then they're only getting an additional $600 extra. So they're losing, in reality, about $600 to $700 per year just because they came late. Now think about it. Many people living paycheck to paycheck, expenses go up every single year because of inflation, right? So even from a pay perspective, from a raise perspective, from an opportunity perspective, we have to ingrain in kids that attendance really matters. You don't have to be good at everything you do necessarily. You don't have to be the best performer in class, but you have to come to class. You have to come on time. You have to be in it to win it. So what I think we need from a teacher's perspective is I think that we need to start with going back to leadership that is going to hold students accountable for attendance. We need to have attendance policies that, one, set a limit for attendance and do not allow students to earn credit, and that are brave enough to say, hey, you didn't come for the years you need to come. You're going to have to repeat the class, or you're going to have to repeat the grade. That's a reality. And we can't be doing this kind of credit recovery nonsense, attendance recovery nonsense, because unfortunately kids are going to take advantage of that. We have to hold the line with attendance because it's too important of a life skill to just let go. Okay, so we need to have administrators who set the policy. We need to have administrators and leaders who support the teachers, right? I think it's completely fine to have a culture of teachers assigning after school detentions when kids are late. I think it's reasonable to expect teachers to be communicating with parents, but I also think that if there's attendance issues that go across classes, so if you have a rotating schedule where they're late for math, they're late for English, late for history, they're late for science, they're late for their elective, administrators need to step in. They need to take a hard stance, and they need to say that this is not acceptable, and they need to address that from the beginning. And they need to be willing to hold students, whether that is coming on after school, coming on a Saturday. We got to stop having, excuses except for those really extenuating circumstances. Okay? And then I think by creating a system, and look, it's not going to help everyone, but I think it comes down to, again, loving students enough to hold them to high standards, to say we're not going to allow you to be absent if you want to be successful in this school, in this class. We're not going to allow you to be late. These are the kinds of things, X, that are not going to help you, that are not going to benefit you. These are not the kind of habits you want to be embodying. And I think, unfortunately, for some students, they're going to have to learn the hard way when they don't achieve success. But the reality is, I've honestly found that, and I think it does vary district to district. But again, these are things that, as I said in the beginning of the video, you have those high-flying students who are strongly engaged, in it to win it, want to learn, want to get success. This is not going to impact them. Likely, it's going to impact disproportionately few. Where we need to really work on is engaging the students who are not in it to win it, who don't see themselves in the curriculum, who struggle to see the meaning of high school. This gives us an opportunity to really drive home the importance of attendance, the importance of being in school, and to start to be able to bring them aside and have these conversations because of the reality that, hey, you're not going to go to college, that's fine. But you have to learn to show up. You have to learn to show up on time. Look, I could talk about attendance all day. I've been blabbing for almost like 25 minutes about it, so I think I'm going to leave it there. Of course, there's a lot of stuff that I missed. This is a free-flowing conversation. I kind of try to do it all in one take. If you think there's something I missed and you think that there's something that you want to add to the conversation, hey, feel free to like, feel free to subscribe. Would really love a subscribe because I'm trying to grow the channel out, not trying to, do too much of a, plug myself. But really helpful if you could subscribe, join the conversation. These are important conversations to have, and I value all the comments people have been trying to leave. I value all when I see those likes, and hit the notification bell for the most up-to-date videos. Really appreciate you. This has been a video talking about attendance, tardiness, and attendance policies. How should we address some of that chronic absenteeism that we're seeing in schools? I'm hoping that it will continue to come down, and as the cocoa kind of tries to fade away, that we really continue to push that bar higher to show students that we care enough about them to have those high expectations. Thank you again so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day, and best of luck out there. Take care now.